And then let me move on to my talk for today, which I've titled The Metaphysics of the Coronavirus. Uh, and I want to start by just reading you a Facebook post that I had made. I think it was earlier in the week, actually. And I just had this intuitive hit to write this really short, relatively short post. And it was about like where we're at in evolution as it relates to the virus as playing its role in this. So let me read you the post and then I'm going to reflect on it. So my Facebook post from earlier this week about the virus reads like this. This is an evolutionary time. It's been referred to previously by futurists as the tipping point or the great turning. It is a time of crisis with such large ripples of impact that it cannot be ignored. After humanity comes fully through this crisis, things can never go back to the way they were. I do not say this out of despair or of anxiety, but of hope. What we are experiencing is the evolutionary impulse of the planet. Earth's immune system is redirecting humanity to show up and express the fullness of our benevolence and intelligence for the sole interest of the common good. This crisis, our crisis, is the ultimate opportunity and the birth of the next generation of the human species. So that's the end of my post. So I'm going to reflect on different elements of this in the talk today. And when it comes to the metaphysics of the coronavirus, and I came up with that title because Rita had asked me, she was going to promote the talk and said, well, what's your title? And like that instantly hit me. It's like, the metaphysics of the coronavirus, because this is where we're at. And I'll offer that this idea is a new exploration. And we haven't experienced this before. Of course, in times past, there have been things like the plague, and we read about it, we know it from history, but we really have never lived something like this, and now we are. And it's all the more, I guess, different these days because of our communications, how instantly we can communicate and receive data and information and even be connected to one another. Even though we are social distancing, doesn't mean we actually have to be disconnected. So more on that as well. So this whole experience is new to us. And as we come through this experience, we become then the elders of a global transformation. Okay, and I think that's really important to say. And it's in the context of conscious evolution as well. I mean, Barbara Marx Hubbard said that there were no elders in this movement of conscious evolution, that we are actually the ones becoming the elders, and it's true here as well. We're becoming the elders of a global transformation. And my question to you then is, are we paying attention to that? And will we answer the call to actually show up as the elders? So with that, let's move on then to some of the metaphysical concepts around what the coronavirus is and what it means. And this is just the beginning of the exploration. As time goes on, I think more will be revealed to us in this sense. But it's really telling to me that the corona means crown. And it's sort of amazing from when you consider it from the meaning of the crown. Like it could be a king or a queen. And in this case, the virus is king or queen of what's happening in the world. I mean, we are all paying attention to it necessarily. And then the deeper question is it a malevolent king or queen or a benevolent king or queen? And on the face of it, obviously there's a lot of death and destruction happening in the sense that people are literally dying from this. So let's not treat that lightly at all. And in that sense, you could say, well, the virus is malevolent. It's a bad thing. And as well, it's then rippling through the rest of our world systems and institutions and the way we do things. Right? There's a lot of talk about how is this impacting the economy, because obviously it is. So coronavirus, it's the king of whatever is happening right now, and we're all paying attention to it. Or it's the queen of whatever's happening now, whichever way you want to regard it. I'm not quite sure if it's a masculine or a feminine concept at this point. It's a new exploration, as I said. And it's also, when we look at our practice as unity in unity Christianity, and of course just in Christianity in general, Jesus was considered king or called king. And Jesus said that the kingdom of heaven is among you. Right? So if Jesus is king and telling us that the kingdom of heaven is among us, how then does that juxtapose against the idea or the metaphysical concept that the coronavirus is the king of what's happening to transform the world in these days? And is the coronavirus at odds with our teachings, or is it somehow in harmony with our teachings, the Christ teachings? What are we needing to pay attention to in these times? Again, we are becoming the elders of this time. We're the ones who are having the experience that we'll be able to talk about in the future, as the future calls us to step up and to consciously evolve, and then to think about how does what we're learning about being and being supportive and showing up in this time, how does that then become a template for other crises that we are likely to experience on the planet? And the next one, the one that was getting all the attention before this, was the climate crisis. So we are becoming the elders. Now, I'll tell you, I myself, about a week ago or so, had come down with a bug. And of course, very top of mind is like, well, okay, what do I really have? And I was very diligent about staying in, resting, and just isolating myself. And to me, it felt like a cold, and I've gotten through it now, and pretty much it went through all the common cycles of a cold. So, but of course, my mind there's that piece that, like, what exactly do I have? And it caused me to definitely turn within, because one, I didn't want to expose myself out there, and as well, then just it started my gears turning about the metaphysical meaning of what I was going through. So I consider myself to be recovered from whatever it is I had, and it's become something to meditate on and to help inform my life, frankly, from this point forward, given that it's happened during this time. So there's, again, looking at it from a Christian point of view, if we look at Old Testament, a lot of people will say, well, God, and we've started to see this in the media, that God's punishing us because we've been bad, or there are bad people in the world, or whatever. And it becomes then something now that makes the virus an evil thing, and we're being punished for all the bad things we've done. God's done this before. We read about it in the New Testament. Okay, so is this happening again? And in New Thought and in Unity, when we come across challenges in our lives, and especially when we come to experience things that we don't desire, for instance, if we have a desire for a certain thing to manifest in our lives, and then the opposite happens, for instance, like we really wanted that job. We interviewed for a job and we've been preparing for it, or a promotion, let's say, and we didn't get it, right? And people will say, well, I prayed for that, and I was thinking positive thoughts, and it didn't happen. And is that God punishing me? And then, but from a New Thought perspective, we reframe that as it's perhaps a correction or a redirection. And perhaps that opportunity wasn't yours to have, and it wasn't in your highest good in the moment, or it wasn't in your best interest or in your highest good, period. And sometimes that's hard to accept in the moment when we're hurting from being rejected, or we're hurting from not realizing the thing that we desired. Whenever time goes on, we can reflect back and say, okay, that redirection actually had a purpose. So I invite us all to have that reframe about what's going on here. And again, it's not about taking the gravity of the virus lightly, but it's looking at it metaphysically and then asking ourselves, how are we being redirected to show up in a different way because of what's going on and how we're experiencing it. Okay, so continuing with the metaphysical interpretations, then a virus like this, which is exponentially being spread, the coronavirus, we can consider it like the same as a bad attitude or a bad thought, or this idea that misery loves company, right? If you get together with people and you start complaining about something, everybody just hops on the bandwagon. Oh, well, it feels good, and we're all going to get into the muck together. So a bad attitude is viral. A bad thought is viral. If we think a bad thought and we allow it to fester, it becomes like a virus, and then it affects everything that we're doing in the moment, and how we're showing up, and our attitudes about ourselves and about other people. Okay, so that's just another interpretation. And the other thing about a virus, if you start reading about the science of it, there's a difference between like a viral infection and a bacterial infection, because they're two different things. A bacteria is a living being. A virus is not. A virus itself really isn't living. So it's kind of like, not to make light of it, but then somebody said sort of like a zombie, right? You see, if you've seen any zombie movies, it's like, these dead beings coming and attacking. And it's sort of like that's what a virus is. It's a zombie. And it has real impact. And it does, we do have to be aware of the impact that it has, and we protect ourselves because of it. But if a virus itself is not really living, then it's dead. And we're in this Easter season coming upon, right? I think this is the 5th Sunday of Lent. So we're in the season of triumph over death. And spiritually, we learn in the Easter season, death has no power over us. That was Jesus' demonstration, that death has no power. It's an appearance, and it, again, this is not to make light of what's going on, because people really, truly are dying. We know that, and the numbers are increasing. And for those of us who continue to meditate on this and continue to be diligent about how we're showing up in the world, we can meditate on this idea that we're in the season where spiritually death has no power over us. And this is what the Easter season is all about, triumph over death. Again, the metaphysics of the coronavirus is something new we're working with. So this is an idea that we're going to continue to have to meditate on and develop as the experience continues, because we're just starting the experience. I'd say this is a virus that is putting our chronic extroversion in check for God knows how long. We've exalted being extroverted. People are all about doing things and getting out there, and the myth of multitasking. How many things can we handle at once? And I think literally now it's been killing us. And one interpretation is this virus is showing up to put our chronic extroversion in check as a humanity. And the remedy is turning inward. We're being told, encouraged, almost required in a lot of instances to isolate, to social distance. And this is a form of turning inward. We must become comfortable with ourselves at this point. And when we're extroverted, especially chronically extroverted, we're always looking for distractions, because we really don't want to sit with ourselves. We're uncomfortable being with ourselves. So we go out there and we do things, and we get in groups with a whole bunch of people, and we have parties, and we put ourselves out there, and we do anything to avoid being with ourselves. And I'm talking about humanity and society as it has been in the last several years in general, right? So individually, we're all at different points on the spectrum. But the remedy to our chronic extroversion is to turn inward. And we can no longer anesthetize ourselves with outer distractions. We can no longer project all of our dark stuff outside of ourselves because we can't get out there, or we're not supposed to get out there. It's not an option. So projecting all of our dark stuff now becomes an inner work. And this is going to cause dark nights of the soul for many people. But at the other end of the dark, of course, is the light. So our chronic extroversion being in check, the remedy is turning inward, not only by staying at home, but now sitting with ourselves, being with ourselves, and really practicing not only self-care, but self-love, because you are worthy of that, absolutely. You wouldn't be here if that wasn't your work to do at this moment. And our work to do at this moment is to really, truly learn and to practice self-love in these times. The other thing I want to explore as it relates to coronavirus and its impact on the world is this idea of anti-fragile. So anti-fragility, it's a concept that was popularized by an author in his book, Anti-Fragile, Things That Gain from Disorder. And the author is Nassim Nicholas Taleb, Taleb, I think it's pronounced. And basically, this idea of anti-fragile, when he talks about it in the book, there's three different things he brings up. First is fragile systems. And fragile systems tend to fall apart when they're hit with a system shock. So basically something shocks the system, and if it's a fragile system, that's it. It breaks apart and doesn't come back. And it might be something, just a real simple example of this might be like a relationship you have with somebody. Maybe it's a casual friendship and that's not really deep, and then you get into an argument, maybe over something political, and that's it. And then as soon as that is done, that's the end of the friendship because it wasn't all that resilient. So it's fragile. And then the next type of system is resilient. So resilient systems, or what might be called robust systems, tend to stay the same when hit with a system shock. So we might see this. We might see this with something like our utilities, right? So something happens with electrical or water or telephone or whatever it happens to be, and if let's say there's a windstorm or a tornado. That will shock them, but then things kind of return, and there are contingency plans and there are safety plans in place that have there's a protocol for fixing it, right? So that we might call that a resilient system. And then the third one is an anti-fragile system. So anti-fragile systems actually change and evolve when hit with a system shock, and I believe that's where we're at now. Because if we go back to what I said in the Facebook post I read to you at the beginning of the talk, there's no going back to what's called quote unquote normal. There will be a new normal perhaps, but metaphysically, I see what's happening with the coronavirus, the king or the queen of the times, as it may be, that we're not returning to an old sense of normal. And the question is, as a humanity, are we anti-fragile? Do we actually change and evolve with a system shock? And this is quite the shock, as we all know. So if we look at something like the stock market, it's trying to be resilient. If it drops by so much percentage in a day, they stop trading. Right, so it's trying to be robust by doing that, but the long view of this, especially in how we're being called to show up as a humanity, is that on the table to be reinvented or to be completely broken down and changed, as it is with our healthcare system we're seeing, going through the stresses it's going through. it's in its current state. I don't know if it's anti-fragile. It must evolve with the system shock, and again, we're in the Easter season, and it's really profound to me that we are, because everything that Jesus talked about in terms of being of service to one another was completely selfless. And it didn't have anything to do with endeavoring to make profit for profit's sake. And it didn't have anything to do with acting on one's own behalf to the detriment of everyone else and to ignore everyone else. Time and time again, it's a selfless practice of being Christ-like. And in a way, we can look at the practice of being Christ-like as the ultimate anti-fragile system. Something that's going to change and evolve, particularly involve with the system shock. So it may be scary to us right now, but I believe every system, every institution, everything that we do and the way we do it is on the table to be completely changed as we go through this. It's not going back to an old normal. Whatever the new normal is yet to be determined. However, that new normal is going to be all about us showing up for one another and questioning where we're putting our faith in other institutions, other politicians, other quote unquote leaders, other businesses and companies, especially the largest of them, the legal system, the governance system. All of it's all up on the table, because, as I said in the post, the Earth's immune system is kicking in, and we've had the choice to consciously evolve. Ever since we've become self-aware, we've had the choice to evolve. And the Earth has given us cycles of choice, cycles of opportunity to choose. And now we're being compelled to make the choice. And the Earth's saying, enough fooling around, humanity. Get it together and show up for one another. And being selfless doesn't mean being a martyr at all. That's another old paradigm. It's not about being a martyr. When we show up for one another, we're actually stronger together. So if I show up as selfless, and I know everybody else is showing up as selfless, we are all benefiting, and nobody is losing out or giving up anything. That's the ultimate anti-fragile system. So the most fortunate and caring thing we can do is simply to be. Be in solitude as we are being in solidarity. Okay, being in solitude because we have to be physically distant from one another. The social distancing, which is really physical distancing. But we can do that and still be in solidarity. The universe is insisting we evolve. The choice is being imposed upon us. And we have the technology to remain connected. If this were to happen a generation ago, we might feel all the more anxious about being disconnected. Now, we would have telephones a generation ago, but being able to talk to you through this channel, online video. There's other channels that we can connect with people in real time, face to face. It might be in two dimensions, but nevertheless, because we share an energetic field on Earth together, we can connect with one another and actually feel into a co-created, heart-centered field. And we can do that through the technology that we have. And actually, I am doing a daily meditation at 9 p.m. Central each night on my Facebook page called Feeling Connected. Because what I'm feeling led to do through what we're going through in this time and in this time of social distancing is to affirm that we indeed remain connected. And if you're feeling challenged and anxious, and unsure of the future, I do a 10-minute meditation every day at 9 p.m. Called Feeling Connected on my Facebook channel. So I would invite you to tune into that if you want to enhance your feeling of connectivity with others. So with that, I'm going to go into meditation here and just invite us all to become centered and still. And as well, thank you. I see some of the comments coming in on the feed. So thank you all for joining and commenting. I certainly appreciate it and grateful to have you all here. So in the spirit of feeling connected, just tune into the energetic field that we all are experiencing by being together on this channel in this moment. And whether you're here live or you're listening to the recording of this, just know that field is constant. It's omnipresent, and therefore our connection is omnipresent. And in the Feeling Connected meditations, I have a mantra, which is, we are never alone. So even if you're all by yourself in your house or your apartment, wherever it happens to be, you are never alone. We are never alone. And the hook that I use to help us expand the feeling of connectedness is simply to feel yourself, your embodied self, seated on the chair and feeling the gravity of the earth holding you gently where you're seated. Because we all share this experience of gravitationally being connected to the earth. And we are always connected to the earth in this way. Just the power of gravity connects us to the earth. So that's where we start. Feeling your embodied self, being in touch with your breathing, following your inhale and exhale, the rhythm of your breath, and feeling the gravitational pull of you seated right where you are. You're not going to float away. And we share that connection with everyone on earth, all of humanity, all sentient life. We are all connected to the earth. So let's start there. In this way, we know that we are never alone. And in your mind's eye, invite you to picture those that you love, your family, your friends, colleagues perhaps. And just see them sitting there with you in this moment. And we have this incredible power of mind to imagine, to conceptualize. And we can create just as real as an experience through the power of our mind as experience in person. So if you desire to experience connection or the presence of others in your life, picture them with you in the room right now, just in your mind's eye. And we're all seated here together in the room, your room. We are never alone. Feeling the gravity of the earth, following the cadence of your breath. Envisioning in your mind's eye being gathered with friends, loved ones, colleagues, people in your community. We are never alone. So let us just continue to meditate on these things for a few moments in the silence. We are never alone. Everyone you love is with you now. Sharing the feeling of being connected through the gravity of the earth. And then now gently begin to bring awareness fully back to your embodied self. Become attuned to your breathing. Just feel the expansion of your chest and the contraction with every inhale and exhale. Feel yourself seated in the chair. Feel the circulation of the air around you in the room or wherever you happen to be. And when you're ready, open your eyes, be here, and be aware right now.